I'm going to show you in this video why 2026 is the end of minus 110 bettors. It has to do with one word, which is taxes. Okay, in 2026, the tax rule for sports bettors is going to change. And it's going to affect the most minus 110 bettors, and I'm going to explain to you guys the reason behind that. First, let's get to what is the differences that the taxes are going to be this year than other years. So, the biggest thing is your losses, okay? You used to be able to deduct 100% of your losses. You used to be able to deduct 100% of those, okay? So what you lose, you can deduct on your taxes when it comes out, and that's where it offsets. Well, now, 2026, it's going to be 90% of your losses, not 100% anymore, okay? So that means if you lose $500,000, well, you're only going to be able to deduct 90% of that. There's going to be 10% left over that needs to be added to your winnings. And I'm going to break down and show you guys exactly what it looks like with my stats on the year of 2025 and how that would affect if that's what I do in 2026, and how a minus 110 bettor would look with the same results trying to hit that magical 55% to call themselves a pro. So if we get to 2025, let's go over my stats that I have. All right. So I was able to make 93,522. Okay. And that is profit. Now my win rate was 75% and my average odds were minus 241. Now let's go through the amount wagered and the amount won. So I made $475,688 with my wins. I lost $382,136. That's what I lost. Okay? And that, obviously, you offset that. That gets you this number right here, $93,522. So with the old tax law in effect, I would be able to pretty much write off 100% of my losses here. But with the new tax law, I can only write off 90% of this, okay? Which leaves 10% over, which is a phantom profit that I have to add to my overall profit. And that phantom profit is $38,214, okay? I have to take that now and add that to my overall profit. And that wasn't money that I made. Okay, that was money that was actually lost. But since I can only deduct 90%, that 10% has to be added down to my profit. So now I'm going to actually be taxed on, instead of taxed 93,522, I'm going to be taxed on $131,766. So what happens now is, like I said, I have to take this excess 10%, add it to my profit. So now, instead of me being taxed on the 93,000 that I actually won, I'm going to be taxed on 132, almost 132,000 that I actually didn't win. Okay, because I didn't win that phantom tax that's getting added to that. Now, once I've done this, now let's figure out, depending on which tax bracket, how much in taxes I'm going to actually have to pay. Now, at a 22% tax bracket, I have to pay $84,007. At 24%, I have to pay $9,171. 32%, I have to pay $12,228. And at 37%, I would have to pay $14,139. So now this depends on what tax bracket overall that I end up falling in. This is how much I would have to pay strictly just from my sports betting. So as you can see, I made in profit, pure profit, a little bit over that $39,000 mark. But I'm going to have to pay taxes depending on which bracket I end up in. I'm going to have to pay taxes on that. So you would subtract any of these numbers to that, and that's going to be my pure actual profit, which still isn't that bad, okay? Still making a decent amount of money, even with the new law and paying taxes. But now I'm going to show you exactly why, if you're trying to hit 55% at minus 110, this is the reason why you're going to struggle and you're not going to be able to be profitable whatsoever. Now I'm going to run the same exact example, but using a bettor that is hunting that 55% mark at minus 110, and I'm going to show you why the numbers are drastically different. So running the same exact numbers, if we put the amount that that bettor would win, it would be $936,270. Now let's get to how much they would lose. This is where the big kicker comes in. They would lose $842,000, okay, overall. Now the reason why these numbers are so big for the 55% bettor is because they have to get way more volume. They have to have way more volume to be able to get the profit that I made with less volume, okay? To be able to make the same amount of money, they need more volume. So that's why these numbers are bigger. So now, look at this number right here. $842,000 is what they lost. Now, the difference here is they have to pay 10% on here and add that to the overall profit, okay? They can't deduct 100%. Just like how I had to deduct only 90%, this bettor has to do the same thing, but at a bigger scale with a bigger number. So if we go and throw up here 93,000 in profit, and I'm just using a round number, as you guys can see, it's more than that, okay? A little bit more. But now this 10% here has to be added up here. So now their phantom tax is going to be pretty much a lot more than what I had to do, okay? Let's put it that way. It's going to be $84,200. That's the phantom tax now that they need to add to their overall profit. So now instead of being taxed on 93 to 94,000, they're going to be taxed on almost double that, which is 174,000 and some change. So they'll actually be being taxed on 174 grand. Instead of, with me, I only got taxed about 30, a little bit over, what was it, 34, 36,000-ish or whatever that I had to add to the profit. Whereas the minus 110 bettor at 55% has to literally, the phantom tax is almost doubling what their profit is. So now their realized gains are 174,000 when they actually only made over 93 grand. So let's go ahead and go through now the tax brackets once again, and let's break that down. 22%, 24%, 32%, and 34%. So let's make this 37%. All right, so 22%, 24, 32, and 37%. Now we have to do, what are the taxes that we're gonna have to pay on that total amount of money of 174. All right, so at 22%, we're looking at $38,280. 24%, we're looking at $41,760. 32%, we're looking at $55,680. And at 37%, we're looking at $64,380. Now look at how drastically different the tax bracket is now, how much you actually have to pay in taxes. Remember, your actually true profit was only a little over 93,000, okay? And now look what you're paying taxes on here. You're paying 40,000 here, 40,000 here, now we're going up to almost 60,000 here, to where that minus 110 bettor is literally giving all of his money back in taxes, okay? Because the reason why is because the volume that he had to hit to be able to get the same results that I got, and also on top of that, the amount of money through that volume that he ended up losing was so drastically more that that 10% just ate up all of his actual profit. So now you would take these numbers, minus all them to that actual profit that you got there, and now you've come to a very low amount of money to where this sports bettor that's trying to hit 55% at minus 110 will not see it worth it and will not end up doing it and cannot make a living doing it. So now let's talk about why that betting is going to become obsolete now compared to what it is that I teach in the Linemaker method. Now, keeping at 75% win rate to up to, like I said, I've been in the 80s before, okay? So keeping that type of win rate right there literally takes your losses to what? 25 to 20%. You're only losing 25 to 20% of the time. So fewer L's equals less tax, which is the phantom tax, okay? Because your losses now, you can't deduct 100%, you can only deduct 90%, but the fewer amount you have in losses, the less amount of money that you're gonna have to pay in taxes. The reason why the other bettors struggle so much is because winning at 55% of the time, he's losing 45% of the time. So all those losses are accumulating and creating more and more money, which creates more tax. So pretty much what the IRS is looking at now is they're just taxing more activity, okay? That bettor that's nonstop betting and keeps, putting in 10, 15 games a day and is trying to beat the system that way, that's who it affects the most, because the volume bettors are the ones that are going to rack up the most in losses, because you're not going to be a volume bettor and hit 80% of the time or 75% of the time. It's not going to happen. You got to pick and choose your spots. So when you're picking and choosing your spots, then you're not going to have in one day 10 losses because you bet 50 games. Okay, you're not going to have that. Okay, you might have one loss here, but that's about it. You're going to win drastically more than you're going to lose, which takes away from your tax. So now the only way to actually turn a substantial amount in profit with sports betting is to be able to limit your losses. Your losses cannot be 40%, 45%. You cannot lose that amount of time, because if you lose 45%, 47%, you are going to get killed by the phantom tax, because that you're not being able to write off 100%. You can only write off 10%, and you're going to get killed with that. And volume bettors will get killed. If you're trying to bet 20 to 50 games a day, You cannot do that. If you do that, you're going to get killed on the taxes. You cannot be a volume bettor. You have to stick to small increments of bets. I suggest anywhere from maybe 1 to 3 if, it's a busy day and there's a lot of stuff going on, maybe to 5. But other than that, no volume that's in the 10, 20, 25 games, 25 player props, none of that stuff, okay? You want to stick to the less amount of bets. You want to aim to hit a high percentage. Because if you're hitting a high percentage, you're losing less, and the phantom tax is not going to kill you as much as it would kill somebody that literally is going to be up in that crazy, crazy volume range, losing 800,000 because they're trying to win 900,000. And that's where it affects the sports bettors the most.